these guys are live. That's 120 volts, 120, 40 across, and they've got the ends taped up there. These are the load side leads going to our temporary.
Hey, what's up guys? We've just got a quick clip for you here today. A few months ago, some guys were asking about checking for a fault on the load side of a new service. But we've actually got a meter that you install that has a breaker built into the meter. It's pretty user-friendly, kind of neat actually. So the service that we have today, it's a little bit different. It's a temporary service for new construction. They're going to be building a house here, and they've built a temporary structure to give power to the construction crew that's going to be working on site. So as you guys can see, the crew was already here. The temporary is hooked up. It's all live. Now, the only reason I'm here today is because the permit wasn't in yet. That's why they have the protective cover that's live in behind there. So we're going to be putting that meter on. In here is our main disconnect, and then our outlets down in that box, of course. So this is the lot where they're going to be building the new home. This will be used for temporary power. And I've got a copy of the permit now. We've got the sticker on the box that has the permit information for this address. So this equipment in our jurisdiction, we don't inspect that. The provincial electrical inspectors look after that. Once the sticker is on, we assume that everything is done properly and up to code. However, you don't want to assume. There certainly could be an error in there. We don't want to put a meter onto a dead short. So we're going to show you guys two quick checks that we do before we install that meter. So the first thing we're going to do is check for voltage. We should have 240 volts across the two top lugs. And we don't have any voltage. All right, so no voltage. Didn't notice that when it first pulled in, but the service is never hooked up. So we're gonna set our truck up now and go hook up those two live leads. Not a big deal that wasn't hooked up. While the crew was here, they could have hooked up. We're allowed to energize their service with one of those hot covers on. There's no issue with that. Unless of course it's going to be sitting for a long period of time. So just before we go and hook up those leads and energize this loop to the temporary, you do want to take the faceplate off. This is all dead right now. You want to take the faceplate off and make sure you're not going to energize into a dead short. I did have once where they forgot to tie in one of these hots, and it was tucked in back against that box. If we had to hook that up, it would have been a dead short. It would have been bad. You could go one step further and ohm out the line itself. At this point, a lot of these are plastic pipes, so if by chance they chafed the line running into the pipe, in this case it would short out. We'll give that a try up there while we're at it as well. Alright guys, so first thing I'll mention, I do have my 20 kV gloves on. My 1 kVs, I found a small tear in the glove cover, so I'll have to get a new set of covers. They've definitely served their time. So these guys are live. That's 120 volts, 120, 40 across, and they've got the ends taped up there. These are the load side leads going to our temporary. So if you did want to verify that you weren't going to be energizing dead short, let's take our meter here. Now if it's a dead short, you're going to see, well, that should actually even beep. So if you hear that noise when you're checking one of the hots, you're not going to heat that up. So we're going to poke that into the bare end, and we're going to touch that right against our neutral. So that one is good.
This guy is also good. You want to check that our meter is working. So we're all set to go. And make sure that these two guys aren't tied together as well. And we're good there. So we have a multi-grounded system. If we check our neutral against anything on the pole that's grounded, we do have a dead short, as you can see. Now the next step, we don't use this number 2 triplex to feed houses anymore, unless it's just a camp or a small 100 amp entrance. For temporaries, however, it's good to go. A lot of times we'll run the 1/0 and leave it on a coil on the tripod. Now in this case, I suspect they're going underground, or perhaps don't know the location of the entrance left. So we have this temporary number 2. So this will be disconnected when the permanent feed comes in. And for that reason, we're going to be using these quick connectors. They're easy to torque, they have a little breakaway nut on them. And the only thing with these, you do want to make sure you check the voltage after installing them. Make sure that the teeth did bite properly in middle line. So they're pretty easy to install. I'm just going to go hand tight with that at first. Now as soon as that bites in, it is going to energize that tip. So we're going to cover that guy up. And might as well put this end on too, even though it's taped. There we go. There's one. So this nut is also isolated from the teeth. This part doesn't become energized once it bites in. I like to put my thumb over the nut so I don't lose it to grass. Someone end up catching it in their lawnmower. These connectors are really good for a tight spot. There's all kinds of room for the leads here, but you get back lot, you're on hooks, climbing a pole, and hooking up something live. These guys are really great for that. They're also good for areas near the coast where there's a lot of salt air. They don't tend to corrode like a typical crimpet. Alright, so now that we've got everything heated up, the top side of this meter, she's energized. That's energized there now. And we're going to check voltage. There's 3 points where you want to check the voltage. You want to check each hot against the neutral, and then across the 240. The only time you're going to get something funny across the 240 really is if you hooked up the same source lead to both those legs, in which case you'll get 0 volts difference between the two. You'll show the 120 to the neutral, but you're going to get 0 volts difference between the two. So across the two hots, we've got 251.8. So that's a little high. It's still within our acceptable parameters. That'll come down a little bit once the load's on. Now our left one to our neutral, 126 on the dot. So again, I would say what's going on there, it's early in the morning. Our voltage regulators would have been tapping up to compensate for the load from all the hot showers and everyone's ovens being on for breakfast. So maybe the voltage regulator is probably going to tap pretty soon. Maybe it needs a little bit of fine tuning here. And we're going to check the other side. We've got 125.7. Now another check you can do, most times the guys will leave the breakers open for this stuff. So you can actually check to see if the breaker's open. If you check voltage across the same side, you're going to get a funny number. You're not going to get 0 and you're not going to get 120. You're going to get something in the middle. So we've got 40 volts. So we know the breaker is in the open position. This one here, we've got 26 volts. If that breaker's closed in, it's going to show you usually full voltage. So we've got that breaker closed in now. We're going to check across, and we're showing 123 volts. So it's showing the difference between the source and the load side lead being 120 volts, which technically is a dead short. You don't want to put that meter on. Now that's where you want to double check with your ohm meter for one. Let's flip that over to our omega symbol, and of course we're going to check our leads. So we're getting a dead short on the side of the box there. You don't want to hit that up on the live lead when you're ohming this out. So we're going to go on our load side against our neutral, and we're good. We're still showing full resistance. Across the two leads, we're good. And last but not least, the other load side hot. So we're not hooking up a dead short there for sure. This is where something we use comes in handy. Probably not a whole lot of guys have seen this before. We actually have a meter with a breaker built right into it. It's pretty neat. It definitely gives you peace of mind when put these meters on. So we're gonna step to the side here and pop that on. We're good to go. You always want to put that on with the breaker in the off position. So this breaker here is still on, so we're actually going to be testing not only the main breaker but right into the system. So this would simulate a house that you show up to hook up and the main breaker was left on. There are some jurisdictions that aren't allowed to hook up the meter unless the main breaker is open. For us, as long as we follow our proper procedures, it's not a big deal. But we're going to flip that on, and if there was a dead short in here, that would trip to the off position. So it's a pretty neat device. There's some instructions on the side there. Load side, check for back feed. Actually, that's something I didn't do. We know there's no back feed here, but to check for back feed, actually, if this was on a residential meter and we heard a generator running, what you're going to do is check for voltage on the load side lugs, which is 0, and you want to check it against your neutral also, of course. Alright, so we're all set. We know voltage is good coming in. We're not going to be popping that meter on to a dead short. This breaker, we might as well flick that back to the off position. When you're putting that cover back on, the newer style has a red protective cover on those two live lugs in case you hit this against the live lugs. That would be very bad. So I always go on from the top first, make sure that's in there secure, lower it down into place, and make sure your lock is on. Now, before I ever let go of this, there are some, especially these older ones, something might be loose. You don't want that to slide down. So I give it a little tug, make sure it's secure. We're good to go. We're ready to put that meter on. One last thing I wanted to mention, guys. There are some people, you can see here, those meter lugs are dry. You want to put a little bit of goop on those meter lugs. A lot of times I'll see people use like a no-lox or a Penetrox, which is made for oxidization between two different metals. So if you use this stuff on a meter and it's an area that has cold weather, in the wintertime that'll harden in the cold. When you yank that meter off, it'll almost break the lug right off and take it with you. So what you should be using, and I apologize that the label is covered up because this metal tubing likes to crack at the seams and leak all over your hands. This stuff is actually a meter grease that's specifically designed for meters. It's conductive grease. This stuff works great if you're ever putting a meter on and it's going on real stiff. Those jaws are just jammed up real tight. You put that stuff on, it's amazing how easy it'll help it slide into place. You can see on this meter, someone was using the proper meter grease. That's what that little bit of red goo is there. We're gonna put a tiny little bit more on the meter. So the best way to put this stuff on is just right on the meter lugs itself. You don't need much, just enough on the tip. So we know we're not putting this onto a dead short, and we're not picking up any load. You also don't want to smack on these. You also don't want to smack on these meters. Covered up in a good firm push is ideal. Sometimes they do get stubborn. As long as it goes on enough, you can get your ring on there, then you're good to go. You can see this one, it was taken off another house. There is a reading on it already, so you want to make sure that you capture that reading for your work order, of course, and the meter number and some other information that I got covered up there right now. So this meter breaker, I guess you'd call it, it's a really great tool. It's very user friendly. Normally what I do when I'm hooking up a new service, I check for voltage coming in. I pop that on, flick the breaker up. If it doesn't trip, we're good to go. We put the meter on. The only issue, it is a 30 amp breaker. So I have occasionally had, during not new construction, but if you go to a fairly large house, they're doing some electrical work, they get a disconnect for the day. At the end of the day, we come back, pop that meter back on after they did some work. You'll want to use that breaker to make sure they didn't forget something or tie in a dead short or whatever. It's just a quick way to verify their work. But the problem is, where it's only a 30 amp breaker, it could pop the breaker just from normal load, normal usage in the house. Your toaster and microwave can draw 12 or 15 amps pretty quick. Maybe they got electric heat coming on, especially if it's been off all day. So as soon as you pop that in, that'll trip that breaker. Ideally, the electrician is still on site and is there to open their main breaker, in which case you'd still use that to make sure from the meter socket to the main there still aren't any issues. But sometimes we get busy. There could be a broken pole, car accident, something that tied up our crews. Maybe we're a little bit late getting back to the house. We don't expect the electrician to wait there all day for us. So we show up, could be 8 o'clock at night, we're getting ready to put that meter back on, and that keeps popping. So in that case, what we're going to do, we're not just going to say, oh, it must just be load, pop the meter on anyways. In that case, what we do, you're going to ohm out your bottom lugs for sure at that point. Check your voltage across the two lugs, see if the main breaker is open or not. The ideal thing to do in that circumstance is get a hold of the homeowner. They're probably going to be home anyways. Get them to open that main breaker, pop that on, and you're good to go. Because even ohming out, you could still get a short across the two bottom leads through an electric water heater or a baseboard heater or something. That's all I got for you guys here today. I thought this was going to be a super quick video, but I didn't expect that I had to go up and energize those leads when I saw the hot cover on the temporary. But I have been wanting to show you guys this meter breaker for a while now. It's a really great tool. Gives a lot of peace of mind when you're not fooling around with all the different readings and ohm checks and stuff in the meter socket. Just pop it on, click the breaker, you're good to go. So curious how many guys out there have seen that. I know it's not something that's common, or I don't think it is anyways. Wondering if any of you guys out there use that tool. Let me know in the comments what you think. Thanks for stopping in as always, and we'll see you next time.